Guys, welcome to today's live session. Just while it's getting live and broadcasting out everywhere, let us know if you can see us and hear us all okay. Those of you guys that are live with us, we will be getting started very shortly. And not to be provocative, but today we're going to talk about the fact that your back doesn't heal from fairy dust, right? It sounds a little bit silly, but I want to start off on today's session because it's a topic of conversation that's been coming up a little bit more recently inside the members area. And a good couple of years ago, we did a thing with some of our premium members, working a little bit more closely with them. And one of the big takeaways that kind of came out of that was this misconception around what you're actually supposed to be doing when you have a herniated disc in your lower back, when you're trying to recover. And so hopefully covering that at the start of today's session will help you guys understand, like, if you've got this disc bulge down here, if you've got an injury to L4-5 or L5-S1, like most of you guys have, you can understand very clearly after this what you're supposed to be doing in order to actually get better, in order to recover, in order to feel better again, and in order to do the things that you want to do. And Daphne's put a comment on here, how often should I do rehab? But that ties in very nicely to the topic of conversation today. And so hopefully this will help you guys understand a little bit more clearly so that you're not in the dark, because a lot of times with lower back pain, we talk about education being important. There's just this phenomenon of you don't know what you don't know. Right, you don't know what you don't know. And Jay said, is it normal to lean to one side because of the pain? That is an antalgic posture, leaning off to the one side, shifting forward slightly or over to the side, not being able to straighten up. All very, very normal, or very, very common, let's say, very common with lower back injuries. And so the first and most important thing to understand, whether you've got lower back pain over here, whether you've got pain going into the buttocks, you've got symptoms going down the leg, numbness in your big toe, a little burning in the shin, whatever those symptoms are, providing they're not with the red flag symptoms, of course, those need to be checked out, right? Thanks, Mia. Mia, sorry. But providing we've got those symptoms, we have an injury in our lower back. Now, for some of you guys more than others, you might have been in a state where you've been significantly less active for an extended period of time. Those of you guys that have had, you've been struggling with, I don't know where my herniated disc has gone, but if you've been struggling with your lower back injury for a longer period of time, you're going to have also lost a degree of muscle mass, lost a degree of structural integrity, and we've got to rebuild all of those things. So the first and most important thing, let's suggest that we have an injury to this segment, most commonly L4, L5, and L5-S1, which means we've injured the tissues that connect the two vertebrae. Now, less commonly, we might have some element of bone fractures, we might have some pars damage, we might have some Modic plate changes, those kind of things. But by and large, we have injured the structures that hold these two vertebrae together. As a result of that, we've got a degree of instability. And so we are trying to heal those tissues. It's not a conscious trying. The body is trying every single day. Come what may, it will always be trying to heal that. And so healing is trying to take place. And healing is a process of regeneration. It requires raw materials. And so that's the first thing. And that's slowly going to occur. These tissues that we've injured, the annulus fibrosus, the ligaments between these layers, the capsule of the facet joint, those tissues heal over matters of months, generally speaking. And then what else we're trying to do is we're trying to rehabilitate. This is the stuff that's happening in the shorter time frame, right? We're trying to rebuild the muscle tissue, strengthen the muscles around this midsection so they provide greater support for the region. We're trying to build the strength of our glutes, our hamstrings, our leg muscles, our core muscles, so they are more capable of providing support and protection. We're using the exercises, we talk about them all the time. The dead bug, the marching bridge, the squat, the hip hinge, the step up, the single leg hip hinge. All of these, what are they doing? Trying to build. They're trying to rebuild tissue to support and protect this lower back. So our bones getting stronger, our ligaments getting stronger, our tendons, lots of you guys that have had it for a long period of time will flirt with issues of hamstring tendonitis or gluteal tendonitis or issues around the bursa on the side here, right? Because of the weakness, vulnerability, loss of integrity of the structure. What do all these things have in common? They are rebuilding. They are being rebuilt. That's the purpose of your rehab in the short, medium, and long term. Different tissues doing that at different times, but all of it is rebuilding tissue. And so you have to ask the question, to go back to the start of the conversation, what are you rebuilding it with? because it's not fairy dust. It's not nothing. It's not water. It's not vitamins. It's not minerals, right? All of those things are obviously important. Hydration, micronutrients. But you've got to be getting enough baseline calories on board. And from a point of view of actually getting these tissues to heal, they're all tissues that are derived in one way or another from protein. And so one of the most important things or areas or groups that we can look at is the guys that are trying to do muscle building. And thankfully, this is a very, very well-researched area. There's lots of people looking to build muscle tissue that don't have an injury. But make no mistake, you with an injury are also looking to do those same kind of things. You're looking to rebuild your body, especially if you've had this for a long period of time. You've lost more. You're looking to rebuild. So looking at those things. And one of the very simple numbers that you guys can all consider is going to be around about 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is the amount of protein you should be shooting for. If you're getting less than that, we're trying to build tissue. It's very, very well researched in the muscular building space, those kind of numbers that we should be looking at from a point of view of rebuilding muscle tissue. And that's, make no mistake, that's what you are all trying to do, because it is in the short term rebuilding the muscle tissue around here that protects these tissues while they're trying to go through the recovery. I can see some of you guys talking about L4-5 disc bulges. I'm talking about herniations in the lumbar spine. This is all relevant. It's all the same stuff, right? And then this was the real impetus for me to talk about this today, the calories. If you are a human being as an adult and you are consuming 1,000 calories a day, expecting to be recovering, rebuilding, we are setting ourselves up for a very, very steep uphill battle. Sometimes I understand that weight loss, someone's just as if on cue, MKLs, but how important is weight loss? Sure, if you are significantly overweight, weight loss is a factor, but starving yourself is not the way to go. Eating 1,000 calories a day whilst trying to heal and regenerate is not the way to go. That kind of extreme approach is a problem. You want to make sure you are providing your body with an appropriate amount of nutrition that is sustainable, prioritizing protein to make sure that you're getting the requirements, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. You can have a little bit more, but I would suggest not going a little bit less, and shoot to try and have that on a daily basis. Don't try, actually do it. Nowadays, all of the food labeling has the necessary amounts of protein. You take your 100 grams of chicken breast and you know that maybe 25 grams of that is going to be protein. So very, very easy maths. And there's many, many free resources out there to help you calculate these things on a daily basis, but measure it. What else have we got to do, right? We've got our rehab, maybe we're doing the program, right? But measure what you're eating. You don't need, generally speaking, we tend to eat the same sort of stuff, right? We don't tend to be that diverse in what we're eating on a daily basis, right? It's pretty much the same, I would imagine, for most of you guys from one week or month to the next. And so there's only so many different meals you're going to have. And once you've got a general idea of how much of protein, how many calories you're consuming, because you take the protein, backfill everything else with carbohydrate, backfill everything else with the fats, and then you've got your calorie intake for the day, and you start to get an understanding. You're eating enough calories for sustenance, and you're eating enough protein. If we're at the point where we're eating 1,000 calories a day or less, and we're trying to heal, recover, and regenerate, we are making a real problem for ourselves, because that is not sufficient for a human being, let alone a human being that is trying to rebuild tissue in their body. You're going to find you get fatigued. You're going to struggle to make progress on the rehab front because you're simply not providing your body with the raw materials necessary. MKL says, I put on a few kilos. I blame it for the flare-up. Now, the few kilos have probably been building for a longer period of time, right? Perhaps through inactivity. And yeah, that's not ideal. Depending on the gender, depending on your specific circumstances, you might not even be putting that on above the lumbar spine. Ladies, typically speaking, tend to lay the weight on a little bit lower down. Guys, it tends to be maybe a little bit more of a problem because it tends to be laid down a little bit higher up. So those are factors to consider. But please understand that you are undergoing a rebuilding process. You need to provide your body with appropriate nutrition. It doesn't need to be complex. We don't need to start going into the weeds. We don't need to worry about magic special supplements that you can subscribe to for significant financial outlay. You just need to eat real food, but do take a little bit of time over the next week to say, okay, well, how many calories am I eating on a daily basis? Is it for sustenance? We're not trying to lose weight here. Am I sustaining myself? And am I getting enough protein on board? And the answer is either yes or no. It's very, very simple. It's not kind of, it's not, so it might be sometimes, right? But make it so that it's yes every day. And if you do that, you're going to find that alongside your rehabilitation, you start doing a whole lot better. Just looking through some of the comments here. So what's your angle? You're not trying to sell anything yet. Don't sell supplements, right? Just eat well and support yourself properly. MYSS says, I'm just checking. I have terrible lower, just checking in. I have terrible lower back pain. Well, you're in the right place. Invest Bible says, camera quality is amazing. Thank you. We finally managed to get the DSLR up instead of doing it on the phone. Lance says, I was born with a narrow spinal canal. No idea until I had a slip and fall. Some of you guys will have these what's called congenital abnormalities. Some of you, I was looking at someone who shared an MRI today and had what looks to be the process of sacralization of the lumbar spine, where the L5 actually is connected to the sacrum, right? In the scenario that we've just mentioned, having the slightly narrower spinal canal, these are congenital abnormalities. They are often distracting factors, right? They're distracting factors that confuse and start to make you think, oh, well, I'm going to have this forever. It's like, no, no, no. You've had a congenitally smaller spinal canal, maybe because the length of these little bony bits here, right? And you've had that for your entire life. When you have an injury, that's a factor that needs to be considered, because if there's less space in here, if we have inflammations filling a smaller cup, it's going to overflow sooner. And in the lower back, it doesn't overflow. It just increases the pressure in the space. And okay, maybe it does overflow a little bit, but it increases the pressure in the space and therefore irritates the nerve. So if you do have congenitally a smaller spinal canal because of the architecture and the structure of your spine, number one, you've had it your whole life. It's very, very irrelevant to the rehabilitation process, but it can explain why you suffer a little bit more from a symptomatic point of view from a little bit of inflammation around the lower back when we have an injury. Thin says, Thin Lee says, I have lower back pain when I'm sitting. Well, knowing that most of you guys have an injury to the lower lumbar spine, when you sit down, you put anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine. It's like saying I have a sprained ankle and when I hop on it, it hurts. Well, of course it's going to hurt. Now, there are reasons why some of you guys find that sitting feels relieving for your particular back pain or sciatica. And there are reasons why standing feels a little bit worse. But generally speaking, sitting is putting more load through the lumbar spine, and therefore it's very reasonable that it will be aggravating. For some of you, you don't realize that aggravation until you try and stand up afterwards. What else have we got here? Someone's talking about toxins. Does chiropractic practices release some toxins from the skin? I think we're going on a bit of a stretch if we're talking about chiropractic practices releasing toxins from the skin. Going in a sauna, you could probably say makes a bit more sense, but I think we're stretching things a little bit if we're talking about that. Someone says, I cannot sit for longer. Don't force it, right? Acknowledge that your lower back injury means that you have a low tolerance issue in the lumbar spine, and you're going to be limited in your ability to do things that strain the lumbar spine. And therefore, do not try and push those things. Focus on your rehab. As you progress with your rehab, you will notice that those other things that you couldn't do before get easier. Your tolerance for them gets greater. MinLab says, if I take enough calories to maintain my body weight and muscle and 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, is that enough for my rehab? Yeah, 1.6 to 2 grams. Some people talk about 1 gram per pound, Maya, which is basically the same as 2 grams per kilogram. That would be good. That would be good for your rehab. Yes, you'd be fueling yourself. We prioritize the protein and then backfill everything else and try and make it the best thing with your diet. I would suggest the simplest approach is get enough calories, get enough protein, backfill everything else with your personal preference for carbohydrate and or fats, right? If you particularly like avocado, bear in mind it's got a little bit more fats. If you particularly like rice, crack on with it, right? Fill out with the vegetables, all that kind of stuff, right? Fill out the diet with the rest. And that's it. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. But if it's intentional, it's whole real food, right? You want to name it. This is an avocado. This is beef. This is some chicken. This is some fish, right? This is a broccoli, right? As long as you can name it, you're going down in the right sort of direction. Fruit Loops are not real food, right? Or not whole food. They wouldn't come under that category, right? If it's got a laundry, the ingredient list should be the thing that you're eating. is a general good rule that you're eating the right sort of stuff. Then Leah says, how long will it take to heal lower back pain? How long is a piece of string, right? The tissues that you've injured can settle down relatively quickly when you go through the right sort of rehab, when you start doing things correctly, when you stop aggravating them. But then being healed is a case of healed for what precisely, right? Some of you guys might experience they're healed enough to squat holding a 5-kilo weight, but they're not healed enough to squat holding a 10-kilo weight. They're healed enough to squat holding a 20-kilo weight. This is why rehab is so important, because you get an answer to that question that is relative to the circumstances at the moment. And tips from my sister says, your thoughts on an upright MRI, please. I think I would suggest, but they tend to be rather expensive. If you're going to have an MRI, probably best having a lying down one, because you're trying to have the MRI for better clarity of the soft tissues, and standing still for an extended period of time inside a tube might not necessarily be the most pleasant experience for you. Whereas standing still for an X-ray, boom, you get it, you're still, it's done, it's a photograph essentially, and then you've got it there. And if you want to see the soft tissues, go and look at it on an MRI. But I think a standing MRI maybe is a little bit unnecessary for the vast majority of people, I would suggest. I think the X-ray is generally more useful and more accessible to more people. Any tips to improve handling live circumstances with a spondylolisthesis at L5-S1? So I'm assuming we need L5-S1, not L1-S5. The most important thing that you guys with lower back injuries can do is focus on learning to stabilize the spine. What does that mean realistically? It means stabilizing the region between your rib cage and your pelvis. That's all you can do, right? We can't preferentially stabilize L5-S1, L4-5, L3-4, right? We can't focus on the individual joints, but we can focus on the region. That's just the way in which we are mapped, we are wired, right? I can stabilize my elbow and bend my wrist, right? I can't do the same thing with my spinal joints. It's just not the way we need to operate. And Celia said, thoughts about barbell back squats. They are good if you've progressed up to them in the right way at the right time. And just coming over to YouTube, following on, Mia says, I have a lot more energy to exercise when I take more calories than that, but then I will put on more weight, of course, and less energy when I take calories for maintaining my weight. I think it's just a case of finding that sweet spot and using the mirror as well, right? Using the mirror to help guide you, whether you're and get the mirror and the scales. The thing that's really important to bear in mind is if you're trying to build muscle tissue and make progress on the rehab front, so Mia being a little bit further on in the recovery process than many others, you need to bear in mind that muscle tissue is going to increase the scales weight, right? So using the mirror as well as the scales can be a helpful tool there. Now, there are better tools than that. You know, having personally used them, I think the DEXA scans are actually really cool because you get a full, honest, objective appraisal of what your current muscle mass is, and it costs, well, last time I got it done, about 100 to 150 pounds, and you get a full detailed understanding, and you can monitor that once a year, for example, to check you're making progress and just how much progress you're making. That's a nice option. Miss Freedom says, I herniated my L4-5 shoveling snow 2 weeks ago. If it was only 2 weeks ago, that's fantastic. That means we can really work on instilling the right kind of practices, learning to provide stability swiftly to that L4-5 area, avoiding any bendy, twisty stuff that's only going to further strain the tissues that are injured, leveraging exercises like the decompression, the bed decompression, the towel decompression to gently take pressure off that disc in a safe way, supporting the neutral lumbar spine, and then we can do nicely. We can recover nice and swiftly. John S says, where can I find exercises? If you're on the YouTube channel, or if you're on TikTok, you can see many of the exercises on the page. And if you want more help, guidance, support, and structure, you can check out the link on the profile page or just send us a DM and we'll send you a link to the program. Roy says, when I do the squat, I go down, there is no pain. And when I come back up, I feel pain in my knees. What's wrong? You're probably going too low for what you are competent to perform. This is one of the reasons why in the members area, we always get you guys to upload videos of your technique so we can see what you're doing incorrectly, so we can understand and vet and guide you guys a little bit more tightly so you don't make these mistakes. They're simple little mistakes and there are often simple corrections for them. Storyteller says, how much pain should I feel after hip hinge out of 10? You shouldn't feel pain after doing a hip hinge. And so if you're feeling pain, we're probably doing it incorrectly. Again, another reason why we want to have some of you guys, I say this, and I know this is the fact, right? Because we get comments all the time to this effect. Some of you guys do have the capacity, maybe got a bit of background experience, you've got the time to go through the material that is freely available online and make progress. But some of you guys, if you've been struggling, you're trying this stuff online, some of you guys need a bit more structure and a bit more support. So use it, it's there. Finley says, do you recommend an inversion table for back pain? I think the inversion tables are fantastic tools. There are 3 tools that I think are well worth it for those of you struggling with lower back pain. The most impactful tool, I think, is a massage gun of some description. We had one of the guys talking about doing a foam roller in the members area yesterday or the day before. I think foam rollers are an absolute waste of time. They are counterproductive in most cases because the areas that you want to foam roll are going to generally be your legs. If we're there going, I'm struggling to squat like this carefully without messing my back up, you lying on a foam roller on your side, kind of trying to do this and roll yourself along the foam roller is not happening. It's just not happening, right? And you might force yourself to do it, and that would be a big mistake. It would not be a wise move. Whereas with the massage gun, you can literally grab it and you can stand there and you can maybe bend a knee to put it on the back of a chair and you can just go up and down the hamstrings. You can also do this wrong as well. You could do this, which would be unwise. But massage guns are so inexpensive nowadays and they're so powerful. You can use them in the early days for symptom management. You can use them to help with the tight muscles. You can help them with feelings of sensation, soreness, stiffness, etc. They can also be useful in the latter stages of your recovery and for long-term well-being. If you've had a hard session, if you're about to have a hard session, but your shoulder's feeling a little bit funny, you want to use it to warm the muscles up a little bit, or the lower back, right? You can use it in a multitude of different ways. So it's a very, very high return on investment purchase. You can get them from under £100. You can spend more on them if you want to get a better model. They are a very, very valuable tool for those of you guys recovering from low back pain. And you won't just use it for recovering from low back pain, you use it for the long term too. You've got it there, you may as well, right? The second tool that we typically recommend is more specific for lower back, and that's this little cube thing you can get, which does contrast bathing. Got a lot of positive feedback. And the reason that we recommend that is it does hot and cold, and it's less fast. So years ago, we would talk about just doing icing for the lower back. 3 to 5 minutes over the lower back to manage inflammation in the lower back. And the primary reason we spoke more about icing for the lower back to manage the inflammation, not using heat, was because contrast bathing is a real faff. Having to go from the fridge to the microwave, now it's wet, now it's cold, now it's hot, you know, it's worth it, but a lot of people don't bother doing it. And if there's too much of a barrier to do the doing, it just doesn't get done. And so we didn't bother recommending icing. But nowadays you've got tools like this little cube, the Thermocube. We've got a video on it online. You can get them on Amazon. You can do hot and cold straight to the lower back by just pressing 2 buttons. And that is a very valuable tool. The third tool that we recommend is the inversion tables. But the reason it's third is because, number one, you want to get a good one. You do not want to get a cheap one if you're hanging upside down, right? So the one that we typically recommend would be the one from Tita. It's the mid-range model. And it's got a long stalk so that you don't have to go all the way down to your ankles to unstrap yourself. But because they're cumbersome, not everyone's got enough space to store them in the house. So it's not worth spending money on it if you're not going to keep it. I think it's a really valuable tool for the long term, but not everyone can afford to purchase them, perhaps. And if you're purchasing it, it can't be a clothes hanger, right? It's got to be something that gets used on a daily basis. But they are really powerful because it allows you to regularly provide decompression to the lumbar spine. It's a little bit better, I would argue, than the bed decompression. And so worthwhile doing, worthwhile using. Those are the 3 things that we recommend. But none of those 3 things replace. They are all relief strategies. They are not rehab. Rehab must be done. Must be done. If it's not, you're not rebuilding any resilience whatsoever. April says, both the massage gun and Thermocube have been vital tools to aid my recovery. Yeah. And the nice thing, April, about the Thermocube is that if you injured your shoulder, if you injured your neck, you can use it on those other areas too, right? And it's like $125 if memory serves, £120, something like that. So it's relatively affordable from a point of view of like a long-term investment. It's something that you can use on other areas of the body as well. We don't want to waste money on things that are specific in some of these areas. And yeah, April said great for journeys too. You know, you strap it around the back and you just sit forwards a little bit, or maybe you're in the airport, you're walking around, you got it on your lower back, you know. They're pretty good. Double says, how do I know if I have herniated disc or something less serious like a muscle stiffness? Muscle stiffness is not a diagnosis for back pain. Muscle stiffness is a symptom. You know, if you've got muscle stiffness in your lower back, that's often how these things will first manifest, these injuries to the lumbar spine. If you've got muscle stiffness from your lower back, ask yourself, what did you do? What caused its onset? If you are suffering with recurrent stiffness in your lower back that is made worse by certain activities, mechanical movements, it is highly probable that you have a lower back injury, because most of the time, lower back injuries will first manifest as stiffness or soreness in the muscles. I've been discussing on some of the live comments, or the comment replies on social media today, the fact that in a lot of cases, you guys with sciatica, pain in the leg, will spend months, if not longer sometimes, pursuing a hamstring problem or a tight problem in your legs, when actually it is a lower back generated issue. Like, sure, if you've just done, you know, a massive workout on the hamstring curl machine in the gym and your hamstrings are sore the next day, well, obviously that's a hamstring issue. But if you haven't done anything, and anything of substance, anything of significant magnitude in terms of physically arduous output, and you're just struggling there with stiffness because you're getting out of bed and going, oh gosh, my back's so stiff, chances are you've got a minor back injury and you need to treat it as such. Sciatica, and again, Double said, can it still be sciatica or herniated disc? Sciatica is not a diagnosis. Sciatica is a symptom. The same as, you know, stenosis is not a particularly helpful comment. A herniated disc, a degenerative disc, a strained facet joint. Name the injury. Sciatica is not an injury. Sciatica is a symptom. Sciatica is going to be that some of the nerve roots that go on to produce the sciatic nerve at this location here have been irritated in some way by the injury. Gramian says, I have a sixth lumbar vertebra, so this might be a process called lumbaralization. And it's causing lower back pain. No, it's not. The sixth lumbar vertebra won't be causing lower back pain. We will have an injury perhaps at that level, at the junction between the fifth and sixth lumbar vertebra that is injured. And the fact that we have 6 instead of 5 means that we have a congenital disadvantage, let's say, to recovering, like we were talking about earlier with regards to the person that had a congenitally small spinal canal. The sixth lumbar vertebra isn't causing the lower back pain. It's that the segment between the fifth and sixth lumbar vertebra might be the segment that is injured. And because we have a little bit more instability in the lumbar spine, because we have a little bit less structure, because the sixth lumbar vertebra should actually perhaps be S1, right? We have a baked in level of instability compared to the normal spine that we've had our whole life, by the way, and we just need to negotiate the fact that we are a little bit less stable. You see other individuals that are missing 12th ribs. If they're missing 12th rib, then maybe the QL muscle is running a longer distance. If a muscle has to run a longer distance, it's generally less mechanically strong because it's having to deal with greater distances. For example, if I do a bicep curl, if I shorten my bicep and hold it here and curl weight, I can do a lot more weight. If I sit in a position with my bicep elongated like so, I can do a lot less, because the mechanical advantage or disadvantage is going to be preferential depending on whether the muscle is in a shorter position, advantageous, it's stronger to contract from here, than whether it's out here. Someone said Brookstone massage guns aren't available. They quit working before a year of use. Don't know what brand that is. Is it worth considering squatting more often than at a slightly lower weight than squatting at max but less frequently? I'm going to use the context of a lower back injury and your rehabilitation, and I would suggest that you should be squatting at the right level for you. One of the things that we do is that you've got your heavy sessions, and I don't know what we mean by max in this particular circumstance, but if we say the max that you are doing in your rehab, which would be 5 sets of 10, for example, not like 1 or 2 reps, okay? as we get further on in the recovery process, for some individuals, they might only do 1 or 2 heavy squat or hip hinge sessions a week, but they might also do some lighter range of motion work, right? But if you're in the early stages of recovery, if you're squatting a relatively low level, say, for example, 30, 25% of your body weight, somewhere in that domain, we probably don't need to be squatting in that different way. We could probably be continually doing our heaviest sessions a couple times a week. Evelyn said, acute pain under the outside corner of the heel, so bad I cannot put weight on it. MRI showed nothing. I hobble around because I cannot put weight on it. I have no idea, Evelyn. I assume the MRI has MRI'd the heel, perhaps, but I don't know, I'm afraid. Roy, is there another way to help improve mobility other than stretching? Yes, you do the proper rehabilitation work. Again, when you guys ask these questions, because we are focusing on people with lower back issues, I'm going to use the context of a lower back injury. The context of a healthy person working out in the gym is a different context. And one of the biggest mistakes that you guys make is you see something that looks cool on social media, that someone doing this thing for this whatever, right? And you forget the target of that person, right? The target of that video might well be for a healthy person to activate their glute medius because they're trying to go on a bodybuilding show and need to get it popping. That's not relevant to you as a person with lower back pain. As cool as that might be, as fun as some of this stuff that we see on social media is, you have to understand who is the audience. A great example is Brett the glute guy, who does some great content, really, really detailed, very, very scientific stuff about building the glutes and all this kind of stuff. But some of the things that he talks about are not going to be ideal if you have a lower back injury and you are recovering from that. So some of his stuff is separate. If you're looking at people talking about powerlifting content and some of the things that they talk about, separate, different from people that are recovering from a lower back injury. By all means, we can get back into some of those other things, but when you're recovering from a lower back injury, you need to focus on making sure that the content is relevant to you. And so going back to improving the hip mobility, the hip hinge is a great one. As I mentioned just a moment ago, with regards to Paul's comment, with regards to the hip hinge specifically, that is a great exercise that can be used to improve the mobility of the hip. So you might be in the recovery process and you're further on in the rehab, and you might be doing your heavy hip hinges on a Tuesday afternoon with something like 50 kilos, and you're doing 10 reps of that, 25 kilos, insert number here that's relevant for you. And then you might do half of that weight on a separate day, really working the bottom part of the range of motion. That can be a really helpful strategy. Crystal said, right at the lowest part of the back, right off the spine. What is that? The lowest part of the lumbar spine is down here, right? These bony bits here, these are like the dimples, okay? So on me, they are here, okay? The reason I'm showing you guys this is because people really misunderstand where the lumbar spine actually starts. So those are the dimples where my thumbs are. My lumbar spine isn't really starting till around about here. It's quite high up the back. I happen to have relatively long legs and a short body, right? People often think that, you know, down here is just like, oh, it's sore here. Very often you will get injuries at this section of the lumbar spine and they will refer down to over the tailbone, but there's nothing wrong here. Moshin says, is it true that disc does not repair after it slips or bulges? And depending on how bad the slip or bulge is, it's compressing the nerve. You cannot heal naturally. No, that is not true at all. That is not true at all. All ligaments go through a healing process. Your disc is a series of ligaments. That is the annulus fibrosus. The annulus fibrosus is a series of ligaments that basically function to resist this nucleus, which is the fluid part, trying to escape when it is compressed. When it is compressed, think about a water balloon, right? As you squash down on the water balloon, it tries to escape in all directions. And the skin of the balloon is the only thing that holds the water from dissipating sideways because fluid is non-compressible. And so that's how this works. It heals. It will scar up first, and then that scar tissue will try to remodel. It'll lay down a callus to protect it. And that's when you often feel better, right? And then you move suddenly in one direction, you rip the scab and you feel bad again, right? You get that jolt of pain because it's not gone through the healing process yet. Now, there are specific circumstances that mean that the disc fibers, the spine, has a harder time going through a healing process. And that is why education is so important. First and foremost, you do not have a second spine. So unlike the ligament that you might have strained in your knee, you can lean on the other leg. You can isolate the joint. You can do those other sorts of things temporarily in the short to medium term to allow it to go through and gather some momentum on the healing process. This is why we talk about learning the neutral spine so much, because you don't have a second spine while yours is injured. So you have to take that injury with you every single day, which makes it harder for the tissues to heal, but they heal nonetheless. Every single one of our members that has gone through the process of rehabilitation and gone from squatting their body weight or less, right, only their body weight, and building up, when they've gone from not being able to squat or hip hinge with 5 kilos to being able to do 10, 15, 20, and so on and so forth, make no mistake, that disc is healing. That disc is strengthening. That disc is going through the recovery process and the adaptation process. They do heal. They go through a healing process. They lay down scar tissue. They try and remodel it. They adapt to stress and strain. Right? They do. But it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And unfortunately, if you are constantly wiggling and stretching the tissues all the time because you've been given, unfortunately, the misguided advice to start bending and twisting your spine all over the place, you're going to struggle because you're constantly interrupting that process. So discs do heal. They just have a set of circumstances that makes it a bit harder for them. What have we got here? I've joined live before and he answers those questions. I don't know what we're talking about here. Roger says 11 days since L5 microdiscectomy, 44 male. Feels like I'm healing great. Awesome. How soon can I start the rehab work and what would I start with? Great question, Roger. So here's the question back for you, as soon as you're live. Did you get in and out of the car to go home after surgery? Did you get up off the surgical bed yourself? Did the doctor or surgeon discharging you or nurse discharging you send you home saying you are able to dress yourself at home? You can get dressed in the morning, you can go downstairs, you can have your coffee, maybe go for some walks. If they did, you are doing a bunch of things every single day that are more strenuous than the sorts of exercises that we talk about. And the real frustration around the surgical side of things is that you guys are sent home with next to no guidance and advice other than don't do anything too much, don't bend or twist, etc. You get the idea, right? So I make the case that you should start the rehab immediately because fundamentally, the rehab starts with learning how to stand correctly, right? Learning how to stand upright. If you're just had surgery and you're wandering around like this all day because you haven't been told to stand correctly, well, you're making life harder for yourself. That's an academic thing, right? That should start immediately. In learning to engage the core is something that you can do on the bed. It's something that you can do here, there, and everywhere, right? The squat, okay? It might be that you just got the chair set up and you're just doing this carefully, right? If you got out of bed this morning, your bed might have been lower than this chair. So how did you do the squat then? This is the case that I make all the time, is that you guys get sent home without proper rehabilitation guidance at a time when you're probably not working, right? Because you had a bit of time off post-surgery and you want to do something, but they don't give you any guidance, right? So I'd suggest the rehabilitation work starts. It should start immediately, I would argue. I'd make a strong case for that. Because how can you sit there and send a patient home doing all sorts of activities on their way to getting home, which are more complex than careful, controlled, purpose-driven rehabilitation work? What else have we got here? Some comments. I don't believe he can read any of the comments on TikTok. No, we can read the comments on TikTok, but there's a lot of them. And sometimes it's worthwhile going through things in a little bit more detail, guys. Melissa says, I have a chronic lower back pain, occupational injury, and it's giving me so much dust. I'm not sure what the rest of that is, Melissa. I have multi-level degenerative changes and a grade 1 spondylolisthesis. L3-4, will Pilates something? Pilates is a hobby, guys. Pilates is a hobby. It is not rehabilitation. Yoga is a hobby. Doing golf is a hobby, right? It's important that we understand when we have a lower back injury, just like if we have a shoulder injury, if we have a knee injury, we should do a rehabilitation process that is for that joint, right? Or that region. So if you have a shoulder injury, you don't just go to the gym. You don't just do Pilates. You don't just do yoga. You don't just do golf, right? Even though there might be things in those practices that might well be helpful, you don't go to a hobby. You do actual focused rehabilitation work, right? And so that's important. Pilates is a hobby, and it has some things that might well be helpful. But unless you're going to the Pilates class that is specifically using Pilates-inspired movements to make up a rehabilitation program that is focused for the lower back, and there will be some of those, by the way, but you need to make sure you're not just doing Pilates, because that's a hobby, right? Morianne says, glutes are still sore from sciatica. How can I free up the glutes? When you have sciatica, you have an injury to the lower back. So let's just say it's maybe L5S1 or L4-5. This is L4, L5, this is L5S1 down here. And these little nerves can be irritated. Those little nerves being irritated means that we often get a degree of dysfunction in the hip musculature. This could be the glutes, it could be muscles like piriformis, etc. And so we feel tension in those regions. Often people feel like they want to stretch or free up the glutes. So they're doing stretches in all sorts of positions, figure 4 stretches, etc. Because they think that sciatica is the problem and the glutes are tight is a problem, they will focus on doing all sorts of things like this and all the, all the other, right? You know them, right? But they focus on that rather than the injury. And so you might do things that in the moment feel good, but you're not actually doing anything to support the recovery of the injury, which is at the root cause of your sciatica. And in quite a problematic way, you're also doing things in the pursuit of feeling better that are making the problem worse. And so you free up the glutes, you find your symptoms of sciatica go away when you fix the problem, when you support the healing process in the problem, when you stop aggravating the problem. If you're lying on your back, twisting yourself across, doing this horrible stretch here, as nice as it might feel in the moment, you are not focusing on the problem, you are chasing after the symptoms. Now, sometimes you can chase after the symptoms and not undermine the problem, right? We talked about using the massage gun instead of a foam roller, because the massage gun allows you to interface with the muscle tightness in your glutes or hamstrings in a way that doesn't forsake the lower back, like the foam roller does. You could do a hamstring stretch to help, right? With a neutral spine. And that would be helpful. It's not rehab, but it's a temporary relief of the tightness in your hamstrings. Or you could do a hamstring stretch by doing that. That is a bad hamstring stretch and shows we don't have an understanding of anatomy irrespective of the lower back, because the lumbar spine bending has nothing to do with the hamstrings, right? You bending your lumbar spine as part of a hamstring stretch just shows we're not actually being precise. Now, sometimes you can get away with that. That's fine, right? You can be lazy and get away with that. That's okay. But don't think that rounding your lower back is making the hamstring stretch any more effective. I would argue it's actually doing to the contrary. And if you've got a lower back injury, it's definitely not helpful. 717 Paro says, how long after lumbar fusion should I start physio? Sooner rather than later, you should start your rehabilitation work. You have to ask the question when it comes to comparing physio to what you're doing, to the surgery or whatever. You need to compare physio, proper rehabilitative exercises, I mean here, to what you're doing every day. Make a list of the things that you are willing to do every single day, maybe that you've been given approval for by your surgical team. Have you been told that getting out of bed is okay? Great. Well, you've been told you can squat. Have you been told you can get off the toilet seat? Yes, then you're doing a squat. Have you been told you can get dressed? Well, you're doing all sorts of movements, right, when you get dressed. All of these things, look at what you are doing every single day. This is one of the reasons that we've chosen the specific exercises that we choose in the program. The dead bug, the marching bridge, the squat, the hip hinge, the step up, the single leg hip hinge. The reason we've chosen those is because you are doing those every single day anyway. The choice is you can either continue to do them without any awareness, any thought, or you can learn how to do them correctly and have an appreciation for your ability to do them correctly or not, as the case may be, and then work to improve that. Mrs. Lewis says, I can't believe the difference in approach to this reoccurring injury since learning of treating the root cause rather than treating your symptoms. So glad I found your page. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Lou. That's appreciated, right? But hopefully it is fundamentally a very common sense approach, right? Well, of course, we want to treat the actual problem, support resolution of the problem, right? And the other important thing to understand here is that the problem is trying to heal every single day. Much of what we're doing is getting out of the way of that process, is supporting and protecting that process. Because fundamentally, you don't do any more healing of your herniated disc or of your back injury than you do of a graze on the surface of your skin. You're not sat there going, heal, 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 heal. It does it on its own. The problem with lower back pain is because it's got some quirks to it, often people are continually making the problem worse. What else have we got here? I have been lying down and resting since Monday. Suspected pinched nerve in my lower back. Again, the way you talk about the problem, you guys might be thinking I'm being pedantic with this, but it's really not. You have to take a step back. It's not the pinched nerve that is the problem. That's what's giving you symptoms, but the injury is the problem. And you don't actually know if it's a pinched nerve or not, because all pain is going to be mediated through the nerves. So if you've got a raging disc herniation, that's nerve pain, right? Now, it might not be banging the nerve, right? We can all experience nerve pain right now. If we get the right spot here and we bang it on the table, we will experience nerve pain because we literally just hit a nerve, right? We hit the ulnar nerve as it comes around the inside here and we get the shooting pain down the arm. Interestingly enough, we don't actually have any symptoms in the arm. The symptoms are sensory. So they go back up to the brain and the brain thinks that something's happening in the arm because we hijacked the nerve halfway up it and sent a signal up to the brain. Same thing with sciatica, right? When you're experiencing that sciatic pain down in your leg, it's actually that somewhere along here, something's irritating the nerve and sending a signal up to the brain, and the brain thinks that nerve tells me what's going on in my big toe. Actually, it's being interfaced with here. Sensory pathways go from the periphery to the brain, even though we feel like the pain is shooting out. It's just the way in which the brain processes things. It's interesting to think about if you want to get nerdy. Is doing 6 rehab exercises 3 times a day enough for the coming 6 weeks? 6 weeks post-op, one by Jude. The important thing to understand is that you guys need to do a rehabilitation program, not just exercises for a couple of days. And the way in which you do the exercises must necessarily change as you go through the process of your rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is a scaling process. So if you're just doing, for example, squats 3 times a day, or the 6 exercises that we talk about 3 times a day, that's necessary to start with, and that might be appropriate to start with. They should always be aggravation free, as we say time and time again. But you do them regularly while you're learning. Once you have learned them, you need to put them into a workout because you have to actually strengthen. Strengthening requires 3 things. I think we discussed this the other day. Strengthening requires you to do the exercises at the appropriate intensity necessary to trigger change within the body, right? And in the first instance, we're talking about the muscles. It needs to then be recovered from adequately, and then it needs to be done with regularity. People make the categorical mistake of doing 3 sets of 10 squats a couple of times through the day for the next 6 months and expecting to actually get stronger. That's not how it works. That's not a rehab program. That's just 3 activities that you happen to be doing multiple times a day. And while you will get some benefit from that by virtue of the fact that, assuming you're being conscientious with it, you will get some benefits of improving your technique, which will hopefully, if you're applying this, have spillover benefits. So for example, because you're learning how to squat correctly, you won't instinctively just go and do this when you sit down and this when you get up. Because you're squatting regularly, you develop a good pattern. So you sit down and get up with a neutral spine in a way that's more beneficial and less provocative of your lower back injury. So there will be spillover benefits. But you have to actually scale the process, and you have to do that safely. Some of you guys, for example, that have a background in training, in working out before you injured your back, will run into problems that you are not aware of when you start increasing the resistance of your squats or hip hinges. And that can catch people out. Double, and this is going to be an interesting answer. It might throw some of you guys. Does a herniated disc always give pain and tingling in the legs? Sometimes a herniated disc will give you no pain. And by the way, while you're recovering and you get to a point where you have no pain, you might still have that disc herniated. There we go. Isn't that interesting? What does that mean, Mike? It might well do the MRI, and it might even be worse than it was before, right? Because it doesn't just pop back in, right? The healing process will invariably happen around here. The margins will be tightening up. The scar tissue will be laying down. Right? When you have a cut on the surface of your skin and it stops hurting, you might have a scab and a mound because the scab's sticking out so much, right? It's quite clearly not healed, but it doesn't hurt anymore unless I poke it. That's the same thing that's going on in your lower back. And that can really confuse some people because they have a checkup MRI. And I think that's really fundamentally a waste of time and a waste of money, especially if we're doing it in short time frames, because tissues don't remodel in that time frame. If we're having another MRI to check the status quo, it's quite irrelevant, really, unless we've got some certain symptoms, emergency symptoms that might suggest warranting looking into it in more detail. And for those of you that haven't watched the channel for a while, you might not know that I am very, very pro imaging. I think imaging is valuable. But also understanding how these tissues go through a healing process is also very, very important. If I bend my back in half, will my spine break? No. But if you've got an injury, let's make it more simple, because the spine is so abstract for you guys. It almost doesn't exist apart from in these little models, right? If I've just sprained my ankle and I've just gone boom, right? I've just gone over on my ankle, off to the side, right? I don't repeatedly do this daily to try and recover. I hold it steady. I strengthen it up. And then I notice in a couple of months' time that if I go over like that, it doesn't hurt anymore, because the tissues in the ligaments have tightened back up. They've healed. They've been through the recovery process. But that's what people do with lower back injuries, right? They sprain this side. They go, boom, ouch, sprained. They've damaged it, because that's fundamentally what you've got. You sprained the ligament, right? You strained the ligament. And then they repeatedly do this over and over again when they do their knee hugs and child's pose. Sahara, impacts on the lower back are not going to be particularly helpful if you have a lower back injury. I'll leave it at that. Sunny, how do I know if SIJ or a disc bulge? I've been told both diagnoses from different sources. Some practitioners just like SIJ issues, right? Let's think about it. Unless you are a pregnant lady, you don't have an SIJ issue as a primary issue. Your SIJs, how they diagnosed an SIJ issue would be interesting as a primary issue. The SIJ moves a couple of degrees, if that. What is a couple of degrees? Like, go and draw it out on a pie chart. It's like nothing. And the notion that a practitioner can feel it, I did a very detailed podcast on this a number of years ago, and I haven't bothered revisiting it. But most of the practitioners that say they're feeling things moving, they're moving up here. They're feeling skin moving over the surface. They're not feeling anything. We might like to think we can, but it's like looking at clouds in the sky. Oh, do you see that looks like a dragon? Oh, that one looks like a man. It's like, yeah, maybe not, right? The SIJs hardly move, and they certainly don't move in a perceivable way, and you can't move yours, not in a reliable way, right? Now, can you move? Yes, you can move it, but you can't just move your SIJ. It moves in a tiny, tiny way. It's a very, very peculiar joint. And what happens is you have a lower back injury that is managed poorly, and then you go, oh, well, maybe it's something else then. No. You've just managed the lower back injury very poorly. And the things that you do to the lower back often are then going to have knock-on effects in the SIJ. So you have a regional issue, right? The way the SIJ works is that it works in tandem with flexion and extension of the body, the lumbar spine, and of the hips. So the way in which you have the surface of the SIJ joint is kind of rough. So it interlocks when it's in certain positions. So when we stand up into an upright position with a degree of vertical alignment, it's got a little, it's locked in place. Why? Because gravity is pressing down. This is called an inverted keystone mechanism, and it's locking it in place. Why is that helpful? Because we wouldn't want a wobbly SIJ if we're load bearing, and the body is likely to be load bearing when it's in the upright position. If we contrast that with the flex position, curling up, like maybe sitting cross-legged on the floor, or curling down, or crawling through a small hole where our legs are up like so, it relatively disengages a little bit. So it allows a little bit more wiggle room in the very flexed position. It does have a little bit of room. The problem is, as we discussed very recently on some of the lives, a lot of you guys are stuck in a rounded position all day. And so you're relatively disengaging the SIJ. And again, I say relative because these things hardly move. but it's a little bit. And so it's very reasonable to suggest that if you've got a lower back issue and you've spent minutes, hours, days, weeks, years doing these kind of stretches, you've probably created a little bit more instability in the region, which would include the SIJ as well. The good news is everything that we talk about in terms of stabilizing the lumbar spine is stabilizing the region and is also going to be providing stability for the SIJ as well. What else have we got? Some more comments coming in here. Jonathan says, post L45 microdiscectomy, 7th to the 12th, so 7th of December. So we're a good few months on now. Normal physio and rehab till BIS onset. Mild relapse in pain. Any advice here? Now correlate. Doing the program till then without difficulty. Jonathan, if you've had a little relapse, which it sounds like you have, get into the members area and give us a little bit more detail, a little bit more of an account so we can have a look and give you a bit more guidance there. But fundamentally, people have relapses along the way. We want to learn from these relapses, want to learn from these flare-ups. 95+% of the time, your flare-ups happen in the real world because we did X, Y, or Z. We pushed ourselves a bit too far. We decided we wanted to go out to the garden and spend the afternoon gardening. Now the sunshine has come out, etc. And we pushed ourselves a bit too much and we got a flare-up as a result. So we can try and learn from that, but then we go back to the plan. Sometimes it's actually a benefit to have these flare-ups because you feel like you're a little bit more sensitive when you then perform the rehabilitation exercises like the dead bug, the marching bridges, etc., the squats, the hip hinges. And so that tunes you in to where you might have been previously getting away with technical errors. So have a look. Give us an update, Jonathan, and we can go back through things in more detail in the members area. Mrs. Lou says, I keep hearing about peptides. Do they slow down DDD or help with the healing of herniated discs? I very much doubt you're going to find any specific research on lumbar spine issues and healing of the discs, but generally speaking, the mechanisms of action that are proposed with things like BPC 157, which is one of the common ones, which I did look into in a little bit of detail, seem to sound like they could do something to help. In conjunction with proper rehabilitation work. They seem interesting. So please do your own research, but at least they are something positive that is hypothesized to help support the healing process. A lot of the studies tend to be on animal studies, but they do seem to show some interesting stuff. The only problem you've got to be mindful of is that you've got to trust the brand that you're buying them off, because I think there's going to be a lot of rip-off stuff, especially considering it is quite popular in the bodybuilding space as well. You've got to make sure you're getting a good quality supplement, I would suggest, in that kind of domain. Ari, it says, can physiotherapy sometimes increase pain? Yes, it can frequently increase pain if we're doing the wrong sort of exercises. Additionally, you have to understand that when you start proper spine stability exercises to help you with the lower back, you must understand that you might not actually be very good at those exercises, and you might, probably will, make some mistakes when you're doing them. So even the correct rehab, as you're going through the learning process, you might well make mistakes and create a bit of aggravation. And that's one of the reasons why we say to you guys, you should record yourself. Because if you go, hey, Mike, I did these hip hinges and my back was killing me afterwards, and then you go and watch the video, that's not a hip hinge. You just did a series of back bends. So what you thought you did and what you actually did are two different things. And what you're supposed to do is a third different thing, right? And so that's why it's very important to take your rehab seriously. Record yourself while you're doing load-bearing exercises, especially the squats and the hip hinges. They're such vital movements to learn to do correctly. How could you possibly know what you're doing if you're not recording yourself? And I'd ask you guys the question, seriously, if you've been struggling with lower back pain, how many times have you recorded yourself doing your exercises the last week? If you've been struggling. Once you're not struggling, it's a different thing. Like, you can be a bit more lax with the recordings, but if you are struggling, you have not recorded yourself doing your exercises, are we taking this seriously? Seriously, right? Everybody's got a smartphone now. All of you guys on TikTok are watching on a smartphone, right? If you've not recorded yourself doing your rehabilitation, you're missing a massive trick. And by the way, it's free. It's free to do. What have we got? Diagnosed with degenerative disc disease at 14.6 years later. So 6 years later, disabled from 3 mildly herniated discs, bulging disc inflammation. They tell me the damage is mild. Yeah, guys, we see this all the time, right? We see this very frequently. maybe all the time is a bit of hyperbole, but very frequently, you can have a minor back injury that is managed terribly. And there could be a number of people at fault in that particular scenario, including the individual, right? And you're struggling very, very badly with a minor back injury, objectively speaking. Equally, you can have people with major back problems that do not have the same degree of symptoms by any stretch, and they manage it very, very well. A large amount of that comes down to the education of the individual that is imparted as part of the rehabilitation process, the discipline on the exercise front, and the exercises that are chosen, of course, the approach that's being used. But make no mistake, it disheartens people sometimes when they say, you know, well, I had my MRI and they said it wasn't that bad. It's like, great, that's fantastic. Yeah, but I'm struggling, I'm in so much pain. Why isn't it worse? Because you're managing the problem really badly. We all know people outside of back pain, right? Outside of back pain, we all know people that when they have a problem, I'm sure we could think of things, right? I have a problem. I could take a number of actions. We know people, maybe we've even been guilty of this ourselves. We take actions that verifiably make the problem worse. We are our own worst enemy. Sometimes it's through ignorance. We didn't know any better, right? And often when it comes to the lower back, you're not an expert in it, so you don't know. You inadvertently do these things. But you can struggle disproportionately to the symptom. You can have disproportionate symptoms compared to the actual severity of the objective injury. And that's fantastic if it is the case, because it means that you can turn things around quick. But it needs to start up here. Mindset, education, these things are very, very important. The secret Scrapman says, I have 5 herniated / bulging discs. 2 are bilateral, have chronic sciatica, mainly one-sided. With IDD be suitable as a program with many discs involved? I'm very, very much an IDD. There's a big IDD table behind that door there, right? In fact, no, I can't bother. I'll do that, right? Behind that door, there is an IDD table. In fact, go on, let's get it out. Okay, you might be able to see it. I don't actually know if you will be able to on the camera. Okay, lights are off. I don't know if you can see the computer there. Maybe you can. Maybe you can just peek it, right? The spine's in the way, right? Just because I know that online people don't believe people when they say stuff, right? Doesn't look as good with the blind up, right? Behind that door, just to show you, there is actually something there. Okay, there's a big IDD table. So I know what I'm talking about when I talk about IDD. It is great, but you have to understand that it is not rehabilitation. Okay, it is not rehabilitation. It is a treatment. It's a great treatment, right? Very good treatment. But it needs to be done in conjunction with your rehabilitation work. It needs to be done sensibly, right? Zed says, now I understand. I need to retrain my core, neutralize my spine. That's exactly what we talk about. And yes, you know, unfortunately, Zed has suffered with conflicting information from osteopaths and physiotherapists early on. And I understand that. And it's tough. It is tough, right? But at least now we know, right? At least now we know. And the important thing that you guys have to understand is that the practitioner is there to help you, there to educate you. They are there to field questions from you, to help engage you and improve your understanding of your own body. Because you have to leave the clinic. If you've been on the table behind there and then you walk out the clinic and you start bending and twisting your back all over the shop, that's a real problem. Now, whose fault is that, right? It's my fault if I haven't told you those things. It's your fault if you do them anyway, right? And that's an important thing. We have to understand that it is a team effort for you guys to get better with the lower back issue. It's a team effort. We're working together on this. And to that end, we've been going for about an hour. Hopefully that's been helpful for you guys. I know there's been a bunch of comments that have come in on TikTok, but guys, if you need more help, just send us a DM on TikTok. That's going to be the easiest thing you can do. Just send us a DM. I think there's a DM thing on here anyway. But I would strongly suggest if you have been struggling for a long period of time with lower back pain, with sciatica, not getting better, check out the program. If you're on Instagram, there's links on the profile page. If you're on TikTok, there's links on the profile page. If you're on YouTube, you can see it in the pinned comment. We'll add it afterwards, but it's the website backinshapeprogram.com, and you can learn more about the program there. Those of you guys that are members, thanks for joining. If you need any more help, any more guidance, get into the members area over the weekend. We will be back again on Monday. Until then, guys, those of you that are members, we're there to help you. Get your videos in, get your questions in over the weekend if you're struggling with anything. Get to work, you know, with your exercises, with your rehabilitation, and don't neglect the education, right? In the program, we've got the Your Back Health section, the educational section. There are nearly 100 videos there to help you guys understand, sort out up here. Because, you know, the biggest area that people forget is you might be doing your exercises for half an hour of the day, right? A lot of the routines in the program are under 30 minutes. You've got your little core relief routines, care of self routines, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that, right? It depends. There's a little bit of a longer one, but it depends, right? And with those sorts of time commitments, there's a lot of extra time in the day. The extra time in the day is the bit that you are left to your own devices without instruction. That's where the education comes in. Understanding these things, understanding that you should be applying what you're learning in your exercises to your daily life. These are very, very important things that you must start getting right. If you don't, you will do great work in your rehab and you will undermine it every single time as soon as you step out of the workout environment. And you'll get very, very despondent, very, very frustrated in the process of doing that. So guys, thanks to all of you guys that joined. Thanks, April, for the comment there. So thank you for the BS education and rehab. Thank you for being a part of it, April. And it's a pleasure, Min Lab. Guys, we'll have the recording up immediately on the YouTube channel. So those of you that came in a little bit late and missed, you can head over to the YouTube channel and watch the recording. And guys, have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Take care, guys. Bye.